They were the picture of an ordinary American family, Bobby, Sherilyn, and their 6-year-old daughter, Madison. A couple looking to start over, escape the chaos of life, and settle somewhere quiet in the hills of Oklahoma. They packed up their truck with essentials, their little dog tucked in the back, and drove off into the remote wilderness near Red Oak on October 8, 2009. They were never seen alive again. But this is not just another disappearance. This is a case that freezes the blood. When their pickup truck was found days later, keys still in the ignition, phones untouched, wallets untouched, and $32,000 in cash stuffed under the driver's seat, it was clear something had gone horribly wrong. Their malnourished dog, Maisie, was barely alive inside the locked vehicle. There was no sign of a struggle, no tire tracks leading away. It was as if the Jamison family had simply vanished into the woods. Then 4 years later, deep in the underbrush just 3 miles from where the truck was abandoned, hunters stumbled upon skeletal remains. The bones belonged to Bobby, Sherilyn, and little Madison, but their deaths raised more questions than answers. No visible signs of trauma, no clear cause of death, just bones, decayed clothes, and the same haunting silence that had surrounded the case for years. From the beginning, the Jamison story has defied logic. It's a mystery tangled in bizarre behavior, possible cult connections, unexplainable surveillance footage, and a haunting final GPS ping that led search teams straight into nothingness. What really happened to the Jamison family in those dense Oklahoma woods? Was it foul play, a carefully staged disappearance, or something far darker than anyone imagined? Or some say it was a murder-suicide. Others whisper about drugs, mental illness, or even spiritual warfare. But no theory, not even the most outlandish, has ever been proven. This is the Untold Trace, and I am your host. We dive deep into crime stories the world refuses to forget, and those it's tried to bury. In this episode, we unravel one of the most disturbing family disappearances in modern American history: the Jamison family mystery. The last known footage of the family is stranger than fiction. Their home surveillance camera recorded them on the day they left, loading their truck with what seemed to be random possessions back and forth silently, over and over. No talking, no expression, just a ghostly rhythm, like they were entranced or following invisible commands. It was eerie. Even their closest relatives couldn't explain it. Bobby had recently been involved in a lawsuit. He was suing his father for embezzlement and making threats against his family. Sherilyn was reported to suffer from severe depression. There were even rumors that she practiced witchcraft, based on a graffiti-scrawled message found inside their storage container. Was this a couple crumbling under pressure, or were they preparing for something far more sinister? And then there was the money, $32,000 in cash hidden beneath the seat. They were unemployed. Friends claimed that they didn't have that kind of money. Where did it come from? Why was it left untouched in the vehicle? If robbery wasn't the motive, what was? The questions keep piling up. The deeper we go, the darker it gets. And the truth, it's buried somewhere between what we know and what we fear. So far, no one has been charged. No official cause of death has ever been determined. The Jamison case remains unsolved, one of America's most unsettling modern mysteries. But we're only just beginning. Before we unravel the eerie GPS trail, explore the possible involvement of cults and meth dealers, and uncover the psychological descent that may have plagued the family, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow the Untold Trace. This story is only going to get stranger, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Stay with us. When search teams first approached the Jamison family's abandoned pickup truck, what they found sent shivers down their spines. It was October the 17th, 2009, 9 days after the family had vanished, and the white truck was sitting eerily in the woods of Latimer County, Oklahoma, on a narrow dirt track far from civilization. The scene was too still, too undisturbed, like the aftermath of something staged or sinister. Inside the vehicle were the family's IDs, wallets, Sherilyn's purse, Bobby's cell phone, Madison's school books, a GPS system, and that haunting pile of cash, $32,000, tucked beneath the seat as if it had been forgotten. Most chilling of all was their dog Maisie, barely alive, left in the vehicle for days without food or water. The windows had been rolled up. She was dehydrated and shaking, curled up in a corner as if waiting for her owners to return. And yet, there was no trace of the Jamisons. No blood, no signs of a struggle, no footprints leading into the woods. It was as if the entire family had stepped out of the truck and dissolved into the forest. The terrain was harsh, rocky slopes, dense brush, remote wilderness. Law enforcement launched an immediate search operation, with dogs, helicopters, ATVs, and hundreds of volunteers combing the area. But they found nothing, not a single shred of evidence, no clothing, no remains, no dropped items, no clues. It was as if the family had walked into the woods and vanished off the face of the earth. At this point, theories began to brew like storm clouds. Sherilyn's best friend claimed the couple had been under immense emotional pressure. Bobby had been feuding with his father, Bob Dean Jamison, over a family trust and business dealings. Bobby accused his father of threatening the family and embezzling money. According to court documents, Bobby had even claimed his father was involved in white supremacist cult activity and methamphetamine distribution. Whether this was paranoia or rooted in truth remains unclear. Then there was Sherilyn. She had suffered from bipolar disorder for years, and according to family members, had stopped taking her medication. In her diary, she wrote of being haunted by spirits, of feeling watched and cursed. She once told friends that their house was haunted by ghosts of children. Bobby, in turn, confided to a pastor that he'd seen 2 to 4 spirits in the home. They believed their house was under spiritual attack and even asked the pastor if there was special bullets to shoot spirits. This was no ordinary family drama. It was a descent into something darker. The spiritual and the psychological were blurring. The fear was real. And then came the surveillance footage. Investigators obtained hours of bizarre home video captured by the family's own security system on the day of their disappearance. What they found was disturbing. The Jamisons were seen repeatedly walking from their house to the truck, loading items in silence. Bobby would walk slowly to the truck, carrying a box, place it inside, then walk back. Sherilyn followed, pacing in near unison. No words exchanged, no clear urgency, just a mechanical, trance-like routine, as if they were under a spell. At one point, Sherilyn placed a brown leather briefcase inside the truck, a briefcase that was never found again. Watching the footage felt like watching ghosts. Law enforcement were baffled. Psychologists questioned whether the family was suffering from shared delusions or psychosis. Theories of religious hysteria began to form. Were they preparing for a spiritual journey, a cult meeting, or simply trying to escape from perceived darkness in their lives? But then there was the money. Where did $32,000 in cash come from? They hadn't been working steadily. No bank withdrawals traced. Some believed they were involved in a drug deal, maybe trying to buy land from someone operating in the meth trade. It would explain the cash, the remote location, and the need for secrecy. It could also explain why things went so wrong. Another strange detail Sherilyn owned, a .22 caliber pistol, which she carried for protection. It was supposed to be in the truck, but it was missing. Investigators scoured the truck and the surrounding area, but the weapon was never located. If she brought it with her, did she use it? Did someone else? The last ping from Bobby's cell phone came from a location just over 3 miles from the truck, in a thick patch of woods, the same area where their remains would eventually be found 4 years later. But back then, in 2009, that ping led searchers nowhere. They walked the coordinates, they brought in dogs. Still, nothing turned up. It was as if the forest had swallowed them whole. The media latched onto the story. National coverage turned the Jamisons into a modern American ghost story, a family who walked into the woods and never returned. The public debated every possibility: murder-suicide, cult abduction, mental breakdown, drug deal gone wrong. But no theory stuck. Meanwhile, time passed. Seasons changed, and the woods held on to their secret. Then came the breakthrough. On November 16, 2013, 4 years after the family disappeared, hunters stumbled upon partial human remains in a remote clearing near Panola Mountain. It was less than 3 miles from where the truck had been found. Scattered bones, scraps of clothing, adult shoes, and a child's tiny skull. DNA later confirmed what everyone feared: the remains were those of Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison. The Jamison family had been found, but the mystery was far from over. There were no visible signs of trauma, no bullet holes, no stab wounds, no evidence of blunt force. The cause of death for all three was labeled unknown. The only thing certain was that they died together, sometime in late 2009, and their bodies lay undiscovered for years, just yards from where search teams had once walked. To make matters even more chilling, Madison's remains were found lying between her parents, her little bones nestled in the leaves, like she had died trying to stay close to them. Some investigators believe they may have succumbed to the elements' exposure or starvation after becoming lost. Others are convinced someone staged the truck scene to hide the truth. And there are still too many missing pieces. Where was Sherilyn's pistol? What happened to the briefcase? Who brought the cash? Why didn't trained dogs find the bodies in 2009? Was there foul play? Or was this a family unraveling quietly into tragedy? The quiet Oklahoma wilderness hides many secrets, but some of them whisper louder than others. And in the case of the Jamison family, those whispers have only grown darker with time. After their remains were discovered, the mystery didn't end, it deepened. It wasn't just how they died that chilled investigators to the bone. It was everything they left behind. People who knew the Jamisons described them as loving parents, though undeniably troubled. Friends recalled their growing obsession with spiritual darkness. Bobby and Sherilyn had reportedly claimed to see spirits in their home. They believed their house was haunted, not metaphorically, but literally. Bobby even went so far as to ask a local pastor for spiritual bullets to fight off the spirits tormenting them. It sounded unbelievable, delusional, and yet there were signs that something was truly tormenting them. Inside the family's home, investigators found strange graffiti, including satanic symbols and bizarre writings. One message, scribbled by Sherilyn in what appeared to be permanent marker, read, "Get out, witches!" She had also spray-painted other warnings across walls and furniture. Some interpreted it as her lashing out at supposed enemies. Others believed it reflected a mind unraveling. But Sherilyn's best friend insisted it was more than mental illness. She was convinced the Jamisons were being attacked spiritually and that they were trying to escape something far worse than financial stress or family drama. Then came the diary. Sherilyn kept a personal journal, and parts of it were filled with disturbing thoughts. She wrote about death, about feeling watched, about invisible forces threatening her daughter. She accused Bobby of being distant, of acting possessed. There were even hints that she no longer felt safe around him, that something in him had changed. Investigators were left wondering, was the couple slipping into shared delusion? Or had someone or something manipulated them into silence and fear? The couple had also become increasingly isolated. Neighbors described them as withdrawn. They rarely left the house in their final months. Sherilyn pulled Madison out of school to homeschool her, claiming it was for safety. Bobby, once energetic and social, had become a recluse, reportedly obsessed with books about the occult and demons. Their lives were shrinking, closing in like the walls of a trap. That's when a more sinister theory took hold. Perhaps the Jamisons didn't disappear alone. Whispers began circulating about cults operating in the rural Oklahoma area. There were stories passed quietly between locals about secret gatherings in the woods, about strange symbols etched into trees, about fires in the distance at night. Some believed the Jamisons had stumbled into something they weren't supposed to see. Others believed they were trying to join. According to one of Sherilyn's friends, she had been dabbling in witchcraft. The friend claimed Sherilyn had become obsessed with casting protective spells over her family and that she believed dark forces were following them. One chilling report suggested Sherilyn had purchased a witch's Bible shortly before the family vanished, but the book was never found. The briefcase Sherilyn was seen loading into the truck that day, also never found. Some believe it contained documents or evidence of something they were planning to escape from, perhaps even cult records. But without it, we're left only with speculation and silence. Then there's the money. The $32,000 hidden in the car still defies explanation. Neither Bobby nor Sherilyn had jobs at the time. They lived on disability checks and small savings. There was no known loan, no large withdrawal, no family member admitted to giving them the cash. It was untraceable, just like whoever may have led them into those woods. That kind of money in a rural, drug-riddled area raised alarms. Latimer County had long struggled with methamphetamine trafficking. Some speculated the Jamisons were attempting to buy land from someone connected to the drug trade. Perhaps it was a land deal gone wrong. Perhaps someone took their money and then took their lives. But why wasn't anything taken? Why wasn't the truck stolen or hidden? Why leave the money behind? The lack of any clear motive only added to the suspicion that this wasn't a random act, that it was personal, premeditated, and ritualistic. Others turned inward, focusing not on cults or dealers, but on the family itself. Sherilyn's mother told police she believed her daughter was murdered. She didn't believe the family simply got lost in the woods and died from exposure. She believed someone lured them out there, someone they knew, someone they trusted. One troubling clue added weight to this theory. The skeletal remains of Bobby and Sherilyn were found lying face down, side by side. But Madison's tiny body was found a few feet away, curled into a fetal position, as if she had been trying to crawl toward her parents in her final moments. It broke the hearts of everyone who worked the case. Some speculated that Bobby may have murdered his wife and daughter, then taken his own life, a theory rooted in the idea of a murder-suicide pact. But the evidence didn't support it. There were no weapons found, no trauma to the bones, no note, and family members firmly denied that Bobby or Sherilyn were capable of such violence. Another strange detail, the positioning of the bodies and the fact that the police dogs had scoured that exact area back in 2009, but found nothing, led some to believe the remains had been moved, that they had died elsewhere and were later dumped in that spot. If that's true, someone had kept their bodies hidden for years before returning them. The idea that someone staged the scene, parked the truck, walked them into the woods, and executed a cover-up haunted the minds of investigators. If someone did this, they left no trace. No DNA, no fingerprints, no confessions. The entire Jamison family was wiped out, and no one saw or heard a thing. As media attention intensified, amateur sleuths on Reddit and online forums took the case apart piece by piece. They examined every minute of the home surveillance footage. They mapped GPS coordinates. They studied occult texts for clues. But nothing ever led to a solid answer. The mystery remained just out of reach. Even seasoned detectives admitted defeat. Latimer County Sheriff Israel Bosham, who led the original investigation, stated publicly, "A lot of investigators, including myself, cannot believe that we can't come up with more answers. It's just baffling." As months turned into years, the case slipped into the cold files. There were no suspects, no leads, just a legacy of fear and sorrow. And yet some people still believe the answer lies not in what was found, but in what remains hidden: the missing gun, the lost briefcase, the $32,000. The surveillance footage that feels like a cry for help from beyond the grave. Whatever happened in those woods wasn't just strange, it was unholy. If someone out there knows something, they've stayed silent all this time. And if the Jamisons truly walked into that wilderness seeking peace, they never found it. Before we continue, like, comment, and subscribe to the Untold Trace, because sometimes the most haunting truths are buried not in evidence, but in absence. The truth behind the Jamison family's final moments remains wrapped in layers of silence. Deafening, haunting silence. Not just the silence of the forest or of a case gone cold, but the silence of a family that may have died knowing something no one else ever would. Every road, every theory, every detail we uncover only brings us closer to a truth that refuses to speak. Investigators have long been troubled by the placement of the Jamisons' bodies. When their skeletal remains were discovered in 2013, they were found lying under a small cluster of trees in an area previously searched. How could a family of 3 and a child go undiscovered for 4 years in a location just 3 miles from where the truck was abandoned? Search and rescue teams had combed that very region using dogs and helicopters. It wasn't just thoroughly searched. It was saturated. This raises a deeply unsettling possibility that the Jamisons didn't die there, that someone kept their bodies hidden, perhaps in a shed or deep in a cave, and later returned to place them where they were eventually found. But why? To send a message? To create a false trail? Or to bury evidence already decayed beyond discovery? There was no grave, no shallow ditch, no attempt to hide the bones. It looked almost ceremonial, laid down gently, facing downward. Some believe it was staged. Others say it was nature, randomness. But seasoned investigators know nothing is ever random in cases like this. Then there's the question of motive. If this was murder, it was an execution without a reason. No suspects, no known enemies outside Bobby's father, and even that lead went nowhere. No ransom, no robbery, no signs of struggle. A whole family erased, without motive, without noise. Sheriff Bochum, speaking years after the discovery, still called it the most perplexing case of his career. He said, "Nothing adds up. Not the money, not the dog, not the disappearance, not even the bodies. It's like something out of a horror story." But this wasn't fiction. It was real, and it happened in his own backyard. What continued to unnerve everyone involved was the Jamisons' mental state leading up to their disappearance. In the months prior, Bobby had begun researching demons and dark magic online. Sherilyn had been writing bizarre notes in her journal, some of them sounding like confessions, others like curses. Their behavior on the home surveillance footage was unsettling at best. Mechanical movements, long stares, silence. And yet there were no signs that they planned to die. They were planning to buy a plot of land. They had a GPS loaded with coordinates for a 40-acre lot in the Sandboy Mountains, a quiet place where they hoped to build a home and live off-grid. Sherilyn even brought along a box of firearms for protection, including her .22 caliber pistol, one that was never found again. Was it used, stolen, hidden? If they were planning a fresh start, why were they acting like fugitives? One theory that's floated over the years is that they were attempting to fake their own deaths, part of some elaborate escape. Perhaps they were running from someone, or something. But if that were true, why leave behind their child's belongings? Why leave their dog locked in the car? Why bring $32,000 in cash only to leave it behind? Nothing fits. And then there's the briefcase. In the surveillance footage, Sherilyn clearly places a brown briefcase into the truck, possibly containing money, documents, journals. That briefcase has never been found. It didn't turn up in the truck. It wasn't discovered with their remains, and it wasn't recovered during the search. It simply vanished. Some believe that briefcase held the key to everything, perhaps a suicide note, a contract, or even something more damning. If someone else was involved, it could have been taken to erase evidence. If no one else was involved, perhaps it was discarded in a panic before they wandered into the woods. Either way, it's one of the most critical missing pieces of the puzzle. Forensic experts tried to reconstruct the family's final hours. The GPS system in the truck showed their last destination, an isolated area not far from where their bodies would later be found. They had driven there purposefully. It wasn't random, but why stop there? Why leave the truck? And why take only what they could carry? No answers. The remains offered no clues. The bones were too decomposed to determine a cause of death. Toxicology was impossible. Autopsies were inconclusive. Investigators couldn't even determine if they had died peacefully or violently. It was as if the earth itself had erased the evidence. The Jamison home was left untouched for months. Inside, it felt frozen in time. Their personal items lay where they had left them. A Bible was found open on the coffee table. A list of supplies was scrawled on a notepad in Sherilyn's handwriting. One of the last lines read, "Gas, water, maps, prayers." Was that a grocery list or a survival checklist? Some believe they were preparing for an end-of-days event. Others argue it reflected paranoid thinking driven by untreated mental illness. Either way, the combination of their writings, surveillance footage, and isolation painted a deeply disturbing portrait. A family teetering on the edge of faith, fear, or something in between. Years later, the only tangible memory left behind is a makeshift cross placed in the woods where the family's bones were found. No plaque, no inscription, just three nailed boards leaning together. A silent memorial for three souls lost in the dark. Madison, just 6 years old, was remembered by teachers as a happy, curious child. She loved butterflies. She had a shy smile and a backpack covered in glitter. Her death broke something in the local community. It turned a mystery into a tragedy, and it reminded everyone that no theory could ever make sense of a child's life cut short. Bobby's and Sherilyn's families grieved separately, divided by accusations and unanswered questions. Bobby's father denied all involvement, though suspicions lingered. Sherilyn's mother held firm to her belief that her daughter had been murdered. And in the middle of it all, no one knew what truly happened. Years have passed, no arrests, no new evidence, no confessions. The Jamison family didn't just vanish. They became part of something bigger. A myth, a cautionary tale, a ghost story whispered around campfires and forums where true crime obsessives still dissect the case frame by frame. Everyone is looking for that one missing link, that one overlooked clue, that one final truth. But maybe it's already been found and no one knows how to see it. And maybe, just maybe, the truth is more terrifying than any theory we've dared to believe. A father, a mother, a little girl with her whole life ahead of her. Gone. The Jamison family story is one that leaves behind a feeling, a weight that you can't quite shake off. Not just because they vanished, or because their bodies were discovered years later under chilling circumstances. It's the silence that surrounds every corner of their case. It's the feeling that somewhere, buried beneath the surface, is a truth so uncomfortable, so bizarre that no one has been able or willing to speak it out loud. When their remains were found in 2013, many hoped for answers, closure, something, anything that could explain what had happened in the lonely woods of Latimer County. But what they got instead was a conclusion that unraveled into more questions. Why would a young family drive into the forest with no clear plan, leave behind $32,000 in cash, their dog, their belongings, only to die together, side by side 3 miles away? The autopsies provided nothing. No trauma, no fractures, no bullet wounds, no sign of struggle. The bones were too weathered, too broken down by time, rain, insects, and rot. The cause of death for all three was officially marked as unknown. There are few things more horrifying than a death without cause, because without cause there is no story, and without a story, the human mind creates its own. Some believe the family succumbed to the elements, that they wandered into the woods, got lost, and died from exposure or dehydration. But this theory struggles under scrutiny. Why would an entire family, fully clothed with supplies and survival instincts, simply walk away from their truck and get lost just 3 miles away? Why wouldn't they turn back? And more importantly, why were their bodies never found by the dozens of trained search teams and scent-tracking dogs who passed through that exact area? Others believe in something darker, that they were murdered, lured there under false pretenses, perhaps to meet someone about the land deal or something else, that they were executed in silence, their truck left as a prop, the cash untouched to throw off investigators. If it was a murder, it was calculated, clean, and cold. There were no defensive wounds, no signs of running, no distress calls from their phones, nothing that pointed to a frantic moment. It was as if they went willingly to where they died. It makes you wonder, what kind of person could orchestrate such a quiet, invisible act? Some have pointed fingers at Bobby's father, Bob Dean Jamison. Bobby had filed a protective order against him before his disappearance, claiming threats and violent behavior. He accused his father of being involved in criminal activity, even connecting him to a white supremacist group. But investigators could never find any evidence linking him to the deaths. His alibi was solid, and eventually the suspicion faded. Still, in the absence of hard facts, suspicion finds cracks to creep into. Others turn to mental health explanations, that perhaps the family suffered from a shared psychosis, known clinically as folie à deux, a delusional state shared by 2 or more individuals. The Jamisons had isolated themselves from the world. They believed in spirits. They documented visions, demons, and dark energies in their home. Their behavior on camera showed signs of dissociation. Maybe under the weight of fear, paranoia, and untreated illness, they simply gave up, walked into the woods seeking escape or redemption, and never came back. But that theory, too, feels insufficient. Sherilyn had Madison with her. Bobby had cash in hand. They were making plans for a new life. They brought guns, survival gear, a GPS with directions to a specific plot of land. These weren't the actions of people giving up. These were the actions of people running towards something, or running from something. One clue that remains especially disturbing is the position in which Madison's remains were found, curled slightly away from her parents. Her small body separated just enough to feel like she died last, like she had watched. Of all the tragedies in this case, hers is the one that pierces deepest. A child who didn't understand the fear surrounding her, who trusted her parents completely, who followed them into the unknown, and who never came out. In the years since, the Jamison case has become folklore among the true crime community. A modern ghost story, a legend passed from forum to forum, whispered in documentaries, debated by armchair detectives who desperately want to believe that one overlooked detail, one missing file, one misread note might crack the silence wide open. But sometimes evil doesn't come in the form of a killer. Sometimes it lives in fear, in mental illness, in confusion and isolation. Sometimes the forest is just a forest, and sometimes it's not. Today there's no plaque, no gravestone for the Jamisons that visitors flock to. Just that handmade cross, nailed together with pieces of wood, placed at the edge where they were found. The wind rustles the trees, the sun breaks through the leaves, and the ground holds on to its secrets. The Jamison family didn't die loudly. They didn't leave blood, or bodies on display, or a clue that pointed a finger. They left a void, a family-shaped hole in the middle of nowhere. And in that silence, we're left to wonder. Was it madness? Was it murder? Or was it something else entirely? Whatever the truth is, it hasn't surfaced, and maybe it never will. But their story remains, as a reminder that real horror doesn't always scream. Sometimes it walks into the woods with people we know. Sometimes it hides behind a camera's final frame. Sometimes it leaves us with only bones and questions. This has been The Untold Trace. If this story moved you, chilled you, or left you wondering, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Share your thoughts below. What do you think happened to the Jamisons? Was it a crime, a collapse, or something else? Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next case we bring to light. And be sure to check out our other documentaries. We uncover what others leave buried. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware. And remember, some stories never die, they just vanish into the dark.